Stand by to enter the private world of the Missouris51st Militia. Stand by for unrestricted access.
You know, I think we have a problem with the scope, the size, and the power of the federal government in general.
You may commence firing now.
The modern-day militia movement begins in 1994, after a number of tragic confrontations between separatists and federal agencies.
Put a bullet in my head. Hey, I'll make it easy. I'll turn my back on you.
By 1995, at the height of their popularity, there are more than 1 million militia members in the United States. Militias consider themselves patriots who, like America's founding fathers, are willing to fight for the principles on which this country was founded over 200 years ago. Although times have changed, some people feel it's dangerous to let the federal government's power over its citizens steadily increase. Militias believe that the only way to sustain a government of the people, by the people, for the people, is through freedom and self-reliance. Ruby Ridge, Idaho, August 21st, 1992. A cabin occupied by separatist Randy Weaver and his family has been under surveillance for 18 months by federal agents. He's wanted for missing a court date on a weapons violation. In the operation's first face-to-face confrontation, Weaver's 14-year-old son and a U.S. Marshal are shot and killed.
You know what? There's about 50 people out here that would rather be shot than the next child. Pick one, guys. Pick one.
We are taking and will take every reasonable precaution to avoid further loss of life or injury.
On August 22nd, Randy Weaver and a friend are wounded, and Weaver's wife is accidentally killed by an FBI agent. After a tense 11-day standoff, Weaver surrenders and is later acquitted of all charges.
Randy, do you have anything you want to say?
One FBI agent resigns and pleads guilty to obstruction of justice for destroying an after-action critique on the Ruby Ridge matter. 12 other agents are disciplined, but not charged with a crime. Waco, Texas, February 28, 1993. Agents from the FBI and the BATF try to serve arrest and search warrants to religious cult leader David Koresh at his Branch Davidian compound. Koresh is accused of child abuse and illegal possession of automatic weapons and explosives. 4 federal agents are killed during the initial raid. On April 19th, the 51st day of the standoff, fires erupt from within the compound as FBI tanks begin another assault. The blaze kills 86 men, women, and children. 8 Branch Davidians survive and are convicted of various charges ranging from voluntary manslaughter to weapons violations. 2 BATF supervisors are fired, but later reinstated at a lower rank. For an increasingly vocal minority, these events have become the object of anger and frustration and signal an abuse of power by the federal government.
When those children died in Waco, where was the outcry against the terrorist attack on that church?
After the fury at Waco, many civilian militia groups begin to form, and on April 19, 1995, a few radicals take extreme action in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Shortly after 9 a.m., a bomb destroys the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 innocent people. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols are arrested and convicted for carrying out the bombing. Nichols receives a life sentence without parole. McVeigh is sentenced to death. During the investigation, evidence surfaces suggesting both men have ties to the militia movement. Witnesses say that McVeigh and Nichols had attended meetings of the Michigan militia, and a Missouris51st Militia business card was found in Nichols' house during an FBI search. This evidence forces everyone to take a closer look at these mysterious new groups.
The reason I was interested in starting the Missouris 51st Militia goes back to the days of Ruby Ridge, Waco, where the federal government, in my eyes, I perceive them as getting out of hand. The way with dealing with the American people is not go with guns blazing like what was happening back then. We felt that it was time that the everyday citizens start standing up and stating that we're watching you, we don't approve what you're doing, and we want to get back to what the Constitution says your jobs and responsibilities are. Deciding on a name was very critical, and my brother came up with the idea of the Missouris 51st Militia based on the 51-day standoff down at Waco, Texas. One of the biggest catastrophes I personally feel in the 20th century, and we swore an allegiance when we started the 51st that another Waco would not occur within the United States.
I think one of the things that kind of concerned me is I know in one of the very first meetings that they had that they stated they were going to stick to the 3 B's, which was bullets, beans, and the Bible. I think it concerned me at that point what they were going to do with the bullets.
Who are the people in these militias? Are they a threat to society and the U.S. government? And what really goes on inside one of America's largest militias? Inside the Missouri 51st. There are civilian militias in every region of the United States. By 1996, 858 Patriot groups were known to exist. 2 years later, only 523 could still be accounted for. Some had moved underground, which makes them less visible and potentially more dangerous. Remaining above ground gives the Missouri 51st the advantage of using the media to help spread their message. And that's just what 51st co-founder Colonel Jim McKenzie wants.
Choosing the militia instead of another avenue to make these changes, say like going out and being a politician, I would not make a good politician. I feel that, and people have told me, you're too honest. If I make a mistake, I will stand up and say I made a mistake. So the next best thing that we could possibly do was to start a militia. And the reason why that would be is simply because of the name militia gathers attention.
While many in the 51st are registered Republicans and Libertarians, all consider themselves American patriots first.
The best way to voice your opinion is to band together and form a group, and people listen to you a little bit more instead of individuals. And that was the whole focus on the beginning, is let's get together and try to change a few things politically if we can.
Civil rights attorney Brian Levin has testified before Congress on anti-government terrorism. He also trains law enforcement on domestic terrorism related to extremists and hate groups.
One other thing that I think is dangerous about these militias, while the vast majority of them will never do anything but jawbone and act as sounding boards for their wacky ideology, a small underbelly of this movement is dangerous and violent and secretive. And we have to be careful because many of these people who are in that violent fringe have committed a vast array of offenses ranging from murder to terrorism.
Mike McKenzie is a Vietnam veteran. He and his brother Jim are the founders of the Missouri 51st.
It's been estimated that last January 1st, 25,000 new laws, regulations, and rules went into effect. 25,000 per year. With every law, with every rule, with every regulation, power is transferred. Power I used to have, I no longer do.
Militias are notorious for their military-style training, as well as stockpiling weapons, food, and other survivalist supplies. Based in the heart of America, Kansas City, Missouri, the Missouri 51st Militia is no different.
I would say in general, much of what we do is aimed at reducing the size and the power and the scope of the federal government. As the founders intended, very little power was going to be in the hands of the federal government. More power would have been in the hands of the states and the individual. And that trend is exactly opposite. Once again, our agenda is personal freedom and individual liberty. That's all we're about.